Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Lots of drama over the last few days about potential gentlemen's agreements that might have to come in for the start of 2023. The snaking drama that we talked about yesterday, the Vaznev potentially getting banned as well. Octane seems to believe the pros today are softer than they've ever been in Call of Duty history. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to dive into. Firstly, just wanted to do some quick kind of signature comparisons. These cards, I didn't really realize that some of these cards go back even further than the Cold War season. I thought a lot of these cards that came out over the last few days were just from Cold War, but and seemingly some of them are. But still, on the left-hand side here, we have the Championship Inc., which I guess is coming out at the same time, which is from the World Champions of 2019. That, of course, being, the Dallas Empire from that season. Funny, really, that Crim6 is coming up. It was Crim6 with a 6 on the ends, which isn't really what was happening. Now, that season, Crim6 actually went by C6, right? You guys might remember. And it was the same thing in Cold War. The rumor had it that Clay revealed is that Crim did this such that his name tag would be smaller. So only a 2-letter name tag means that obviously Infinity Ward had a slightly different vision this year with the no red nameplates and stuff. But in the previous few games, if you're in a position to get spotted, that name tag being smaller is maybe a minute competitive advantage compared to a larger one. But nonetheless, Crim thought it was significant enough to entirely change his name to C6 to gain that slight bit of competitive edge. And anyway, that's what his signature looks like. Now, Clay's signature I think is kind of the coolest one here. Scumpy's is kind of funny, but just a quick signature comparison. And then also on that championship, there's iLLeY and there's Huke's one as well, which at least he didn't put Kyla and a W in instead, as some of you guys might remember for not too long ago. And even as Clay says, that's the first championship ink he's seen pulled. So yeah, I guess that's why I didn't really think this is a thing. So pretty cool stuff. Wonder how much that's worth based on all the drama that we've seen on the kind of fake bidding and stuff on eBay the last few days. Someone's going to bid that up to like 5k and above. Now, I said earlier today we'll talk a bit about eUnited because eUnited is an organization, of course, they won the World Championship in 2019, had Clayster, Simp, aBeZy, Arcitys, Pristini, some great teams they fielded over the years. And as Bance says, who was one of the founding members and went on to kind of manage the team, it was his last day just a few days ago. If you guys aren't familiar so much with eUnited, we can see here their first tournament they played, MLG Orlando 2016, had Burns in the roster. He then moved on to a different position, and then not too far after that, they signed the team of Arcitys, Pristini, Silly, and Gunners, and they went on to have a phenomenal performance in the early part of that season. You can see it a little bit better here, winning Atlanta in Infinite Warfare, coming second at Dallas, and then they had some roster drama. Clayster came onto the team, had a pretty difficult World War II season, then Black Ops 4, they were super good after they brought Simp into the roster, and then after the 2019 World Championship, they didn't have what it takes to actually, make it into franchising because they were a relatively small organization without a huge amount of backing and funding, and it's just really difficult to make it work in esports right now. And Burns does a very interesting thread on this actually, just from a competitive perspective in esports, and saying that he reckons we're going to go through a dark age in the industry. And this is something that I think it maybe has been coming for some time. The salaries right now are rather high. The publishers, as he says here, are not caring for their esports accounts. The organizations are scaling beyond their means. A lot of these organizations have been held up effectively by venture capital money and also by crypto exchanges, basically, both of which are probably, the crypto exchanges deals are basically falling through, and the VCs are eventually going to want to see some sort of profit, especially in what could be an economic downturn. So I do wonder what happens this year. I think that really the key point is to keep esports afloat is the publishers, let's just say Activision Blizzard in our case, need to appreciate that they can't just take all the profits from this venture, and they need to ensure that their teams are actually being healthy, because I do believe that going into this new year, the teams are going to have a harder time selling sponsors. Getting the ROI this upcoming year especially is potentially going to be rather difficult. So I don't think the CDL is just going to collapse or anything, but I just think that Activision Blizzard need to be careful about this, because a lot of these organizations in the CDL already struggling massively financially and struggling to make any sort of rate of return on their investment in the first place. And in addition to all these other issues that are happening in the wider field, as Burns goes on to say, it might well be very different, and maybe players and agents should be less greedy, try and ensure these organizations can stay afloat until they can land larger deals with sponsors, publishers, or collaborative partners, because even the likes of 100 Thieves, one of the biggest and most let's just say impressive and attractive esports organizations in the world, yes, they've got the content thing, yes, they've got the kind of lifestyle brand thing as well, but they've had to make quite a lot of layoffs over the last few months as well. We've seen the same thing in many different organizations, so it could well be a tough year for esports. Not exactly sure what this means for Call of Duty in the CDL, but I thought it was worth noting this rather interesting thread regardless on Burns' thoughts on the state of esports in general. Of course, he has the inside experience of what it's been like at eUnited, and maybe it's a slightly different story there, as kind of not exactly a bootstrapped company, but not quite a massive VC-backed firm like we're seeing some of, Minnesota Rokkr and others are in the similar boat to that. Could be a big deal going into the new year, and the players might have to expect their salaries they re-sign in the summer to be rather different to before in order for these orgs to stay afloat. Let's dive into some drama then, as we love to on this channel. We've got to talk about this whole GA stuff over the last few days. We've heard about the snipers getting banned at the start of the season. We managed to revert that. They were going to do all sorts of stuff this year, the pros. We managed to generally, the community one up the pros on plenty of different topics this season and got them to change their minds. The M4 then got banned. The Scar, the Vaznev is now a thing. Some AR players even want the Vaznev gone for whatever reason. And Octane was asked the question, what do you think the pros, nowadays should ungentleman's agreement? There was actually some discussion on the tactical sprints. We know that Doug over a few years has talked about the fact that ATS should be unbanned. It's, one of these features that maybe in this game isn't so necessary and also can, help players' hands survive a little bit longer than they have done, let's just say, in the past. Arcitys absolutely frying right here with the Scar, kind of showing that maybe the Vaznev isn't really too strong, all things considered, relative to this. But Octane was talking about the fact that the pros nowadays seem rather soft compared to what they used to be, saying they were going to ban the snipers and also wanting to ban other things as well. And in fairness, maybe he's saying that from a perspective because the Los Angeles Thieves guys wanted to keep the M4 in. They didn't want to ban the M4, and the other pros did. Maybe he feels like that's another sign of the pros being a bit soft nowadays. And there's many different reasons why this might be the case and many different symptoms of this. But it does feel like a very different feeling nowadays to where the pros are compared to where they were even 5 years ago, and certainly about a decade ago when Call of Duty Esports was really starting up.
Wait, Kendall, should we? Wait, Kendall, you want to play one? We can all game. It'll be great. And then Trey can get his girlfriend.
All right, bro. I'll see you in a bit.
Locating the next hard point. Get ready.
I'm not staying in there with you with that attitude. You can speak to me when you apologize.
Area updated. Move to the hard point.
Trey, I'm sorry, man. Come back. No, I need you, Trey. No, come back. Now I got someone else.
I'm already out. I'm already out, bro. I'm already
No, what are you doing? I have a guy who's at a 74U in my game. Where did you go?
You know where I went, bro. You can speak to me when you
Trey,
download
no,
that again.
What GA would take away? Would you take away that creates more strategy?
What? Right from right now?
Yeah, like what? Because you said the pros don't do any favors with the GAs, right?
Well, I mean, I'm just an example with the sniper GA. We try to get rid of it just because pros don't like getting sniped because they're soft. Like we just want to use four of the same gun and run around each other in S&D. Like,
but I'm saying as of right now,
turn on
as of
single
right
tap to
now.
run right now, bro.
I mean, bro, people are
right
like, you want
now,
to play
though.
out of the box. Like, no, but like,
Yeah, no one wants to use Claymore.
Yeah, like obviously we have to tune the game to because what I said. The problem in Call of Duty that will forever exist is it is not inherently competitive. Therefore, we have to do our best to make it such, which is because then it is up to pro interpretation on what is competitive and what is not. That is the problem with Call of Duty because it's up to a bunch of fucking idiots.
I mean, I would say
Yeah, but
smokes,
these idiots
smokes
are
broken,
the most.
so it makes it worse.
Count
To be
it.
fair,
Yeah, but
for the
it's
idiots,
the issues is
and you
always
being
going to be
some of them.
bias.
So there's a few different ways where this kind of like soft thing comes out, and I also shared that other clip there of Octane having a bit of go at Zer0. I think basically, I don't know, like when Zer0 and his girlfriend broke up, but that's basically what Octane was joking about, and I'm sure that Zer0 wasn't like, I'm sure he took it as a bit of a joke, but nonetheless, right, the whole softness culture thing has been discussed endlessly over the last couple of years, and I think even it's pervaded Call of Duty to a certain extent. Even Slasher a couple of weeks ago was talking about how Thieves didn't keep a tweet up, says they're too soft to even do that. And of course, there's been discussions like this before about the gentleman's agreements. This is one of the key ones, right? If you look back to Black Ops 2, GAs weren't really a thing back then. The pros didn't really get frustrated at the state of the game, or they might have got frustrated, but they said, you know what, let's just deal with it, right, and suffer the consequences. There were plenty of things in Black Ops 2 that I am sure if the game was around today, if the game released today, the pros would want to get rid of, 100% guaranteed. The M8A1 was obviously the main AR in that game, was a very good weapon. It was arguably too good up close because it killed in 3 bullets at point blank range, even though it was a 4-round burst weapon and it had very little delay. It was an absolutely dominant force weapon. Maybe the pros would decide today to get rid of that, maybe they would, but it wasn't overpowered necessarily compared to the MSMC. There was a pretty well-balanced meta in that game. The AN94 was still viable in certain situations compared to the M8A1, but there were other things in that game as well. The EMP grenades, for example, that were used pretty much the entire year, they were arguably way too strong in Black Ops 2. They did everything. They had a huge range. They completely took away your HUD. Your minimap was gone. They could be used to spot check things. If you didn't know where someone was, chuck an EMP, you get some information. They, they didn't allow you to call in score streaks, all this stuff. They were so good and so versatile, and they lasted for so long, and there was no counter to them really. Okay, they can get stopped by a trophy, but unless you run the hardwired perk, you can't counter it with a tac mask or a flak jacket or something like that. They were so good, but yet the pros back then decided, you know what, let's just deal with it. That's the state of the game. The EMPs are allowed in the rule set. That's what we're going to use. Nowadays, though, the pros have taken over, right? They make the rule set effectively, or they don't technically, right? The CDL makes the rules, but then they decide on top of that what they're going to do. Ban this gun, ban that gun, ban this attachment, all this stuff. Now, admittedly, as Octane says, it's more necessary nowadays. The game is arguably more broken today. There are more stupid things in the game. There's a million different attachments that there wasn't back in the day. But nonetheless, it does feel like the pros are softer now than they used to be in the past. Like, even back in Black Ops 2, you got riot shields getting pulled out. You guys might remember, if you guys watched way back in the day, this player called Dashy came over. It was a really, like, probably international world championship then. He came over from I think it was the Korean, and his team was not particularly good, but they would pull out riot shields. They'd put them in the ground. I mean, it was pretty comedy to watch, but the pros back then didn't really seem to mind. They were like, okay, whatever, use what you want. Like, we'll just prove that we're better. Nowadays, it's obviously a rather different phenomenon, and Octane doesn't seem to be so happy about it just because they try and ban everything nowadays, and the pros arguably get away with a bit too much. And this maybe trickles down to other elements as well. I feel like, this tweet that I just found up here from Zoomer, and also just to say that the video the other day, I don't know if you guys remember mentioning, but I was like, YouTube seems to be demonetizing more of these words. If there's swear words in the video, they'll demonetize it. And I was like, okay, I'll call their bluff. They got me anyway. I can't believe it. YouTube are way too good. This is like, I guess it's one of their new advertiser-friendly guideline type things, where if you have any swear word, really, it's a bit inconsistent. It doesn't always do it. But the video would just get demonetized pretty effectively. So, yeah, I don't know. YouTube algorithms are built different nowadays. So we've got to screenshot this one, but it gets the point across regardless. That Slash is talking about some of the amateur players being too soft nowadays, and, when they get trash talked on, they get too upset, they start complaining, all this type of stuff. So, bit of a phenomenon maybe over the last few years that the pros are developing, a bit more soft than they used to be, let's say. And I do think that when you see this the most is generally when it comes down to the gentleman's agreement. But nonetheless, we are seeing some pushback on this. Of course, the likes of Scrappy, and even in the culture nowadays, I feel like things are changing around a little bit. But, Scrappy is maybe one such example of that, where this guy isn't particularly PC. Now, it's funny with Toronto, because I feel like as an organization, they had something of a redemption arc, because you guys might remember a couple of years ago during the Cold War season, there was lots of drama really with Toronto, because they had the Cammy drama where he said, let's just say the C word on Twitter, and then he had to do the sensitivity training, and then he became God mode for the rest of the year. But there was also some drama about Brack, you guys might remember. I think he wanted to go home and to his family or something, and then there was some talking points about the fact that they'd not let him go home, or they weren't allowing him to compete if he wasn't at the venue or something like that. So Toronto had a pretty difficult season for PR side, and they've turned it around massively, become a more friendly, like good organization that people actually want to support, and they've got Scrappy in there who's not afraid to push the boundaries a little bit. So hopefully we can get a changing of the guard in the future, and maybe 2022 will be the softest year ever for the pros, and hopefully going forward it might change around a little bit in the future for GAs and other phenomenon. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.